Hey, so I thought I'd start with Saturn's influence over our lives today. But before I dive into that, I thought I'd just give you a quick basic breakdown on how to better understand your charts. Because if you're new to astrology, it can be a bit complicated and quite overwhelming trying to figure out what the planets mean, along with the signs and the houses. So I'm going to try and simplify this for you as much as possible, all right? So the basic understanding is this, all right? Your birth chart is a snapshot of the sky the moment you were born, right? And that snapshot is made up of three things, and those three things are the planets, the signs, and the houses, all right? So the planets equate to the what in your life. So for example, what is Saturn's influence, okay, in your life? So Saturn looks at lessons. Saturn's influence is all around lessons and karma and that sort of thing. Okay, so it's quite a big influence in your life, obviously. If it was Venus, for example, Venus would be anything that equates to love, okay, love and relationships, that sort of thing, right? And then Mercury would be anything to do with communication. So those are like three of the planets we have in our charts, okay, or in the universe rather. The second part of this are the signs, right? And the signs equate to the how. So, for example, if we look at Aries, Aries is known to be a more bold sign. If we look at the Pisces, okay, Pisces is known as being very intuitive. If we look at Virgo, Virgos are known to be quite detailed, okay. And then the third part of this are the houses, okay. So the houses are the where, okay. So if you have Saturn in your first house, okay, the influence around that is going to be around identity. If you've got Saturn in your seventh house, then the influence would be around your relationships. If you have Saturn in your 10th house, then the influence is going to be around your career. So the easy way to think of it would be like this, okay? And we'll continue using Saturn as an example. Saturn is the planet, all right? So Saturn tells you what kind of energy or influence it has. It's the psychological drive you're working with. So in this case, because we're working with Saturn, its influence is discipline, karma, life lessons, delays, emotional maturity, okay? Saturn's influence is always about structure, responsibility, and the kind of growth that sometimes feels like it takes a bit of time, but it definitely leads to lasting strength in your life. The sign Saturn is in always shows you how those lessons show up in your life, okay? So if Saturn is in Aries, those lessons will be around independence, impulse control, or courage, okay? And if your Saturn is in Cancer, those lessons will be around emotional safety, family patterns, and nurturing. And then the house that Saturn sits in will show you where in your life the lessons are going to happen, okay? So, for example, if you have Saturn in your first house, your lessons are going to be around self-worth and identity. If you have Saturn in your seventh house, your lessons are going to be through relationships, commitment, and boundary. So just to recap and make this a little bit easier, you don't have to remember every single thing because we'll do each sign and each house separately in any case. But just to recap, okay, the planet is the what, the sign is the how, and the house is the where. And you need all three of these to actually fully understand the message, okay? I hope this made it slightly easier for you to understand if you're relatively new to astrology. You should pick this up as you go along in any case. So even if you don't get it completely right now, that doesn't matter. It will land when it needs to. So let's talk about what Saturn placement says about your soul lessons, fears, and, just mastery of your life. What does Saturn represent? Okay. So I mentioned earlier that Saturn is the planet of structure, boundaries, responsibility, and karma. It's definitely not the fun, flashy placement in our charts. It's the one that brings us the most important growth. It shows us the area in our lives where we feel blocked or burdened at first, where we'll face our fears and our insecurities. We may carry internalized pressure or shame, depending on where Saturn sits. But also, this is the part of our life where we're building true, unshakable maturity, okay? We don't get given Saturn wisdom. We have to earn it through experience and through self-reflection. And sometimes that tends to take time. So Saturn basically equals our soul's curriculum, Saturn is like the subject you didn't want to take at school. That would be maths for me, but you were in a position where you had to. But once you pass it, it changes everything in your life. You feel so much lighter. It's what your soul came here to master, not just to understand. So wherever Saturn is in your chart is where you're being initiated in your life. Unfortunately, we don't really get shortcuts with Saturn. It's slow, it's really real, but it's so powerful, and the lessons are well worth it at the end. It builds emotional integrity, discipline, and definitely it builds our spiritual muscle. So what does Saturn actually teach? It teaches us what we're truly committed to. It teaches us what we avoid and why. It teaches us what it means to take ourselves seriously in a very healthy way. And it also teaches us where we outsource our authority and where we need to reclaim that. So where Saturn sits in your personal chart is where you're going to feel this the most, right? So Saturn through the houses shows life, shows the life area that's most affected. Saturn through the signs adds nuance about how you experience these lessons. And some of the common Saturn themes across the placements are feeling not good enough, fear of failure, rejection or being judged, or overcompensation through perfectionism or avoidance, or the pressure to have it all together in that specific area of your life. It's like a slow path to confidence, but when it comes, it's honestly really unshakable. So now let's talk about when a planet's in retrograde in your chart. So I've got Saturn in Libra, and Saturn's actually retrograde in my chart. So any of the planets in your chart can be in retrograde. Of course, this excludes the sun and the moon. If the planet's in retrograde at the time of your birth, it usually means that the energy of the planet is turned inward. Okay, so it's delayed or it's processed a little bit more privately, and the lessons often feel more intense, slow, or deeply karmic. What retrograde really means in your natal chart is that basically in astrology, retrograde doesn't literally mean the planet's moving backwards. It's kind of an illusion based on Earth's orbit, but energetically what it symbolizes is reflection, internalization, or revision. So if a planet is retrograde in your natal chart, okay, like it is in mine, you're not going to learn this lesson the normal way. You're going to go through the inner maze version of it, okay? So what that looks like, maybe it takes you time to grasp the lesson. It feels a lot more internal or private. It can often feel quite karmic or ancestral. This is definitely tied to subconscious and spiritual growth. And often it's a lesson that we recycle. So it's something that's revisited over and over again until it's been embodied. And since we're talking about Saturn right now, let's discuss what having Saturn retrograde in a person's chart might mean, okay? So as I said, it's retrograde in my chart. So this is what it actually looks like if Saturn's retrograde in your chart. External authority may not teach you lessons, okay? What's happening is you teach yourself these lessons. You may have had to become your own parent or your own structure in life. You may have seen delays or lessons around boundaries, responsibility, or self-worth. You may feel extra pressure around getting things right because the voice of criticism comes from inside you, not outside. Okay, so you are your biggest inner critic. Okay. Saturn retrograde means that the inner critic is loud and often formed with the world before the world's even judged you. So you think the world is judging you, but it's actually you judging you, and that's so much louder that you often don't even notice it. You may have internalized unrealistic standards for yourself. You may have held yourself back due to fear of being seen as a fraud. Perhaps you struggle to feel like an adult in certain areas of your life, or you felt responsible for things that actually weren't yours to carry. So Saturn in retrograde means that your strength develops from the inside out, okay? And you might be extra self-aware, but also extra self-critical. So your journey becomes about learning that, I don't have to earn my worth. I can build my self-trust from within. All right. So basically what Saturn's trying to give you is emotional endurance. It's trying to give you self-respect. It's giving you the courage to take full responsibility for your life, mastery over victimhood. It's teaching you discernment, not just saying yes to everything. And it's teaching you the long game. So what you build under Saturn actually lasts, okay? It always starts as a bit of fear, but it ends as, the most beautiful foundation. Saturn's energy is, I'm not here to rush you, but I'm here to grow you. Saturn also, teaches you encouragement and self-reflection. And Saturn is the planet that asks you to show up for yourself with consistency, self-respect, and patience. And when you start to honor that path, you'll notice that your whole life begins to shift because you become stronger, clearer, and more grounded in yourself. So that's just a bit of an overview of how Saturn shows up in our charts and the kinds of life themes that it can bring. In the next round of videos, I think I'll start diving into Saturn throughout the signs, so you can get a feel for how this plays out in your specific energy. I'll do a video for each sign, starting with Aries through to Pisces. So if you're curious about what Saturn in your sign says about your lessons you came here to grow through, then I'll be doing those next. So please tune in. I'll break it down as much as I can. I'll try and keep it as grounded as possible, and we're going to try and make it make sense. Thank you for being here. Be kind to yourself. Keep going, and I'll see you soon.